Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately and go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Look, you can create a wrestler, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline pay-per-views, build your own corporation from the ground up, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to all Facebook users, totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, want your name in the shout-outs like my buddy John down in Texas, then hop over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast. Sign up today, $15 a month contributor. You can co-host an episode with me, a $7.50 per month contribution. I will enter you into a drawing to do the same. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you got questions, comments, something you want us to get to in a future episode, give us a shout out to Pro Wrestling Sound Off Line 267-642-1160. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever it is, and we will try to get to it in a future show. Don't forget, check out the homepage of the Pro Wrestling Podcast by going to frowrestling.com and check that out today. Today has been crazy. The big news breaking today, Vince McMahon has pulled a power move and he intends to return to WWE and pursue a sale of the company. Vince McMahon holds the majority voting power, and earlier there was a press release through the Wall Street Journal that McMahon is now actively planning to return to WWE and is hoping to pursue a sale of the company. He is also going to bring people back with him, George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, who were previously members of WWE's board. He has already submitted a letter to add himself and those two back to the board of directors. And now what is interesting is the questions are just everywhere. An update came out a little earlier that a lot of the people, the production crew, the talent, people in creative, nobody knew that this announcement was coming. And that's problematic because at this point in time, you have seen an uptick in the quality of product in WWE. For all of us out there who've been loving everything Triple H has been doing in terms of allowing talent to work other promotions and things like that, it has all been good for WWE and the talent themselves. I think the last episode I had a conversation where I mentioned the quality of the matches in WWE, including people like Elias, who don't always get the opportunity to showcase their talent. Really getting a better opportunity under Triple H's guidance and leadership. Now the questions start coming from everywhere. Who's going to be in charge of what? A lot of the talents that Triple H brought back, what would happen to them if Vince takes over creative? What do we do about people whose contracts are coming up for renewal? What does this do in terms of people in AEW or other free agents and whether or not they'd be willing to come to WWE now, knowing that Vince McMahon can just pull one of these power moves whenever he wants and now clearly is making one of those power moves? I don't like it. I think it's a bad idea for the company. Now, I get it. The way they're presenting this is that Vince McMahon is really coming in to help negotiate all the television rights deals that are coming due in the next year or so. That's a huge part of their negotiation, looking to make as most money, capitalize on it as best they can, and then potentially to sell the company. It said that, according to the Wall Street Journal, it says McMahon initially approached WWE about a return in December with the intention of selling the company. But WWE, while telling McMahon they would work with him, rebuffed a return, believing it would not be in the best interest of the shareholders. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, I suppose, he's not listening to that suggestion. He's coming back. Now, they are willing to work with him, the people who are currently on the board, but it is the word out there is that there are a lot of them that are not happy about this. They don't think this is the right direction for the company. The company, like I said, it's been firing on a lot better cylinders in the last several months, and this could be a problem. This could be something that really could almost shift. It's not going to be a seismic shift in terms of the power and where people are in the terms of the world of professional wrestling. But the real reality is this could have an effect on some of the stories that we don't know the answer to. Is MJF going to want to come to a company run by Vince McMahon versus one run by Triple H? If you think about that, Cody Rhodes coming in was a Vince McMahon thing. Maybe MJF loves what happened with Cody Rhodes, and that's something he's interested in. Maybe he looks at how great the product has been since Triple H took over. Maybe that's more lucrative to him. Maybe he doesn't look at WWE at all because it's just so uncertain. I don't know. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's odd that in 2022, the biggest story of the year had to be Vince McMahon leaving. And within the early days of 2023, this is probably the biggest news story of the year already, Vince McMahon announcing his return. Along the same vine of conversation, Vince McMahon coming back, the other gentleman who left when he was essentially forced to submit his resignation and retire was John Laurinaitis, who was advertised for an event coming up WrestleMania weekend run by Bobby Fulton, the guy who used to be one half of the tag team, the Fantastics. They were doing a convention at WrestleCon, and he was going to be sponsored by Big Time Collectibles. And apparently the fan backlash has just been so horrible that he's been removed from the event, and a replacement will be announced at a later time. But he's the guy who, if nobody remembers, all the melee with Vince McMahon, he was the one who was supposedly sharing someone in an intern with Vince McMahon, which is on a whole nother level of disgusting, especially when you consider he's married to the Bella's mother. But all of this, just not a good look, not a good vibe for WWE at right now, when they really need some positive things to keep up the momentum they've been building for so long. This is not a good thing. And one of the other things that came out today that is absolutely huge, especially for WWE and AEW, who love to lock up their talent into exclusive contracts, the Federal Trade Commission proposed a new rule that could really change professional wrestling. And that rule basically would eliminate non-compete clauses, which means that if you are a professional wrestler and you finish up your contract or you're terminated, you could show up at the other promotion's show literally same day. Because once you're terminated, you would be free to do whatever you want. There wouldn't be a 90-day window, or in NXT's situation, a 30-day window where you couldn't do anything. You would be free to do whatever it is that you want to do. There's some conversation about the other provisions, banning non-compete clauses, potentially allowing independent contractors to work for other people, which would be even bigger. That would be huge. I think there is some merit to getting rid of the no-compete clauses. I think it's ridiculous that if you really build up momentum in one company and you decide to seek out better fortunes elsewhere, the fans are just stuck for 90 days not being able to see one of their favorite wrestlers. I mean, you think about it. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash let their contracts run out, and is the only reason the NWO thing ever worked as well as it did. Had they had to wait 90 days and all that, beyond that, it could have been a very different feel. And I think it would be a good thing to get rid of those 90-day no-compete clauses. I really do. If your contract coming due, you should be able to start with somebody the very next day anyways. But in terms of a termination, especially during the pandemic, you had people who were getting terminated by WWE in 2020, and then another host of layoffs in 2021, and they just can't apply their trade anywhere because they got to worry about these clauses. So I actually would be okay with seeing them go away. But again, more frustrating news for WWE. And one of the reasons it really bugs me today is there's a whole, if you ever check out Wrestling Inc., they have an article up where they talk about Will Ospreay. And Will Ospreay gave a lot of really positive things in his statement about Triple H. And there was conversation about whether or not he could see a scenario where WWE would open the forbidden door and work with New Japan. He said when they talk about the Never Openweight Championship, Carl Anderson defending at Wrestle Kingdom 17 and giving that championship up to Tama Tonga, Will Ospreay said, "I'm shocked at it as well, but in the same sense, now that Triple H is running the ship, like, it's got to be, I think Triple H is a G," Ospreay said. "Like, I honestly think he's such a gangster. I've always liked him. He's such a cool dude, so he clearly watches what goes on outside of his bubble, which is amazing." I agree with him completely. And a little later on, he said, "It does make me wonder what doors could actually be open. I always want to know, like, who's the best out of their crop. I always like testing myself. And I think it would be very, very interesting if there was a way of making that door open. But you never know. You just never know." And that's a great situation for Will Ospreay. It's great to hear that he'd be interested in something. But again, if Triple H is leading creative, that's a possibility. If Vince comes back and takes control, maybe not. Last tidbit of WWE news, Kurt Angle commented on possibly appearing at the Royal Rumble or at WrestleMania, and they also brought up the Raw 30th anniversary. He isn't officially booked for any of those things, but made it very clear that he did suggest storylines for multiple things, including WrestleMania. But right now, he doesn't think they'll accept his ideas, but at least there's ideas out there. Kind of makes you wonder if they're talking about something along the lines of Gable Steveson finally making his debut, or if it's something else where he maybe gets involved with the Alpha Academy or something like that. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Some free agency news. Nick Aldis spoke about leaving the NWA. We talked the other day about how he is now a free agent. And he made it clear, like, everybody, he says, I feel like everyone else is making a bigger deal of it than I am. For me, it wasn't necessarily the case of, oh, I can't wait to go somewhere else. For me, it was just a case of my time here is done. It probably should have been done a year ago, but I decided to give it one more year. And this time I went, no, it's time. It's definitely time for me to move on and explore new opportunities. And, that came from the Universal Wrestling podcast, where he was talking about this whole experience, and I couldn't agree with him more. And the beautiful thing is when he was in TNA, left on his own terms. NWA, leaving on his own terms. He's not, maybe Billy Corgan feels like he's burning bridges, but for anybody who's not Billy Corgan, it looks like he's doing things the honorable way, finishing up his commitments and leaving. I'm anxious to see where he goes next. I think it could be incredible, no matter where he goes. But I really do hope it's a WWE ring. I would love to see him on the biggest stage of them all, especially considering his age. I want him to get as much time in there as possible. AEW hopefully will be open down the way if WWE doesn't push him correctly or something like that. But I would really like to see what he could do in a WWE ring. In terms of the independent scene, there's a new wrestling streaming platform that's getting ready to launch. You're going to see shows like CZW, Combat Zone Wrestling, Great Lakes Championship Wrestling, things like that. Fightful reported that Premier Streaming Network, PSN, is going to launch January 15th. It'll cost about $4.99 per month or $49 a year. And they have about 2,000 hours worth of content from all these independent promotions. The library includes CZW, ECWA, WrestlePro Alaska, Great Lakes Championship Wrestling, World One Wrestling, Frontline Pro Wrestling, and I'm sure there'll be a whole lot of others included with a whole bunch of interview series, spotlight series with Josh Chernoff, the Wrestling Hour with Adam Bernard, and podcasts like the Undisputed Podcast with Bobby Fish and Major Wrestling Figure Podcast. So you might get to see this is a network that would offer something that really none of the other ones do right now. And I'm actually curious to see how it plays out. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Conversation about Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné. People wondering if she's really going to AEW. If you watched Dynamite, it's confusing because they announced that the tag team partner for Saraya is going to be Toni Storm. And then there was like some issues, some uncomfortness with Renee Paquette, and everybody's trying to figure out what's really going on. We saw there was some references to the Boss in the one segment, and it seemed a little strange the way things went down when they announced Toni Storm as the tag team partner for Saraya coming up on the show. And I think Hiraku Shida was the one who was the most perplexed looking on camera. And I think there's still an opportunity here where Shida turns heel and attacks Toni Storm. Now she can't perform, so she needs a new partner. Mercedes Moné comes out and wrestles anyways. But there are other people saying that isn't the case and that she really isn't going to be on the show. However, if I'm giving you my 2 cents, today, the big news in terms of Mercedes Moné, or formerly known as Sasha Banks, is that following her appearance at Wrestle Kingdom 17, she has officially been moved to the alumni section of WWE's website. And that was something that I looked at previously in trying to determine where she was at in terms of being a free agent or still with the company. That was something to me that was a big deal. With her being moved to there, I firmly believe now that she is out of the company for good, or at least in the immediate future. Obviously, we'll be wrestling with New Japan and Stardom, and I think that clears the way for AEW. And I think they'll do some kind of angle where Shida and Storm get into it. Storm can't perform. Saraya doesn't want Shida, and instead it'll be Mercedes Moné. I think that would be huge and a big pop for their women's division. Not that every WWE signing hasn't been great, but I really think that would be the one that really puts it over the edge. And the last thing for tonight of substance, there's conflicting reports about the Young Bucks. Their contracts, we don't know if they're ending in 2023, 2024. There's confusion over that. Same thing with Kenny Omega, 23, 24. We don't know whether they are. There was a report that came out earlier this week that spoke about that they were already in negotiations for their next contract. And then Wrestling Observer Radio questions that and says that they haven't heard that their contracts do expire in 23 and that they've reached out to the Bucks, but the Bucks haven't opened up negotiations. So where it's at, we don't know. I think it's not a good look to have this situation where the Young Bucks are so up in the air. This should never get this far. If you really want to keep your talent, you need to be throwing offers out there early enough that they feel appreciated and want to stick around. Think about it in terms of the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball. More often than not, if it's somebody you want to keep, look at Pat Mahomes, or I'm in the Philadelphia area, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is going to get a new deal this offseason. He's still signed. They don't have to do that. They do that because they want to keep somebody. The Young Bucks are some of the founders of the company. You don't wait until their contract runs out to negotiate a new one. That's part of how Cody Rhodes got away. You negotiate it ahead of time, and that's what should be happening here. We'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. But it's definitely concerning that we don't have a definitive answer on that, or at least when their contracts are up, so that people can really get an idea what they're dealing with. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode where we run down the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks, as always, go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing any music or sound effects we use in our shows. Today's podcast sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this game from Beazle Games by going to frowrestling.com and clicking the icon in the middle of the screen to pick up your copy today. And if you're looking for your next career move, you're considering college, maybe university life, just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our sister website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Dr. Fro, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for just some more excitement, some more wrestling news and rumors, check out www.wrestling.com, WWA, the Worldwide Wrestling Alliance, and any of these smaller independent promotions. Support local wrestling. And until next time, I can't wait to see you guys. Take care. Have a great night.